The internet used to feel like a wild, unpredictable place. Before algorithms dictated everything you saw, before every platform was polished and sanitized, there were corners of the web that felt genuinely unsettling. You didn't just stumble upon weird things, you got trapped in them. For Gen Z, nostalgia for the early internet isn't just about YouTube poop and flash games. It's about the moments when the internet felt like it had secrets. Websites that weren't just pages but experiences. Things that made you hesitate before clicking. That left you staring at your screen afterward, wondering what the hell you had just seen. One of the greatest examples of this is lamando.com. The scariest things on the internet aren't the ones that make you scream right away. They're the ones that lure you in, make you feel safe, and then pull you into something you can't escape from. That's exactly what made lamando.com so terrifying. It didn't look like horror, it didn't warn you, it tricked you into dooming yourself. At first glance, the website looked like nothing more than a harmless Japanese browser game. Its homepage was bright and colorful, designed with the same kind of bubbly aesthetic that made early Flash games so appealing. It called itself Fancy Island, something that sounded more like a cheerful escape than a nightmare. It felt familiar, like the kind of thing you might have played as a kid on a game site filled with dress-up simulators and puzzle games. But the moment you clicked to enter, everything changed. Instead of a cheerful island adventure, you were dropped into something far stranger. The game took place inside an eerie, dark mansion. But unlike traditional games, there was no real movement, no 3D environments, no characters to control. The mansion was a maze of web pages, each one representing a different room. Clicking a link meant walking forward into the unknown, but there was no way to tell if you were making progress or wandering into something that you weren't meant to see. Some rooms were blank, nothing more than empty spaces that led nowhere. Others contained cryptic clues, forcing you to solve puzzles if you wanted to keep moving. But many rooms didn't let you move forward or backward at all. They simply trapped you in place, forcing you to sit there, staring at something that shouldn't exist. At first, the horror was subtle. A page might look normal at first glance, but then you'd notice something was slightly off. An image that flickered for just a second, a strange sound buried in the silence. It made you question whether you had actually seen something or if your brain was just filling in the blanks. But the deeper you went, the more obvious it became that something was watching you. Unlike your typical horror games, Lamando didn't play fair. It didn't just scare you, it messed with your head. The site was designed to make you feel like you weren't in control anymore. Clicking on what seemed like a normal embedded video could suddenly trigger a full-screen jump scare. Some pages pretended to be system errors, making it seem like your browser had crashed or your computer had been infected. There were moments when pop-ups mimicked real Windows alerts, making you hesitate before even realizing that they weren't actually part of your system. It blurred the lines between what was part of the game and what was happening in real life. That was what made it truly unsettling. It wasn't just horror, it was digital psychological warfare. And then there were the jump scares. They weren't the kind that you could prepare for, the ones that built up tension before finally hitting you. They were relentless, unpredictable, and designed to catch you at your most vulnerable. Faces would appear out of nowhere, distorted and stretched beyond recognition, staring directly at you. Some images glitched out of nowhere. Some images glitched and flickered, giving the illusion of movement, even though nothing was actually animated. Others were so warped and unnatural that they barely resembled human expressions at all. The worst part was that you never knew when the next one would hit. The randomness made it impossible to let your guard down. The more you played, the more paranoid that you became. The site also had a way of making you feel completely helpless. Many of the rooms were designed to be dead ends, forcing you to restart from the beginning. Some rooms contained puzzles that seemed impossible to solve without outside help. In fact, some players discovered that they had to leave the site entirely and watch specific YouTube videos to find the answers they needed. There was even a shotgun hidden in the game, an item that let players kill the jump scares so they wouldn't have to keep restarting. And yet, even with tools like that, the mansion never really felt safe. Few people ever reached the so-called end of the game, but those who did found themselves in a final confrontation with a monstrous, clown-like figure. It was the closest thing that the site had to a final boss, and it only reinforced the feeling that Lamando was more than just a prank. It was like a fully realized nightmare. The internet has a way of turning mysteries into obsessions. The moment something appears without an explanation, people start digging, determined to uncover the truth. But sometimes, no matter how deep you go, there's nothing to find. And that's exactly the case with Lamando.com. For years, people have tried to uncover who created the site, where it came from, and why it exists. The unsettling imagery, the intricate puzzles, the bizarre horror elements. It all feels intentional, like the work of someone with a clear vision, and yet there's no official record, no interviews, no traceable history. The few clues that do exist come from scattered usernames supposedly connected to the site. The developer has gone by Nojito, Fancy Island Manager, and Mosu Manager, but beyond those names there's nothing. Searching these aliases leads to dead ends, no social media, no developer portfolios, no interviews. The game doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, which is almost unheard of for something with this much online discussion. Even AI-based searches have turned up nothing useful. Lamando is a complete ghost, a website that seems to have materialized from nowhere with no clear creator and no explanation for its existence. The lack of information really only makes it more unsettling, though. Most horror games, even the weirdest and most disturbing ones, have credits, development logs, or at least a known creator. Even if their origins are mysterious at first, someone eventually comes forward. But Lamando, no one has ever claimed it. Nobody has ever stepped forward to explain what it was meant to be, why it was made, or what inspired it. This level of anonymity makes the site feel cursed in a way that no intentional horror game ever could. It plays into the old internet legend that some corners of the web exist without explanation, not just as forgotten relics, but as things that shouldn't exist at all. For Gen Z, this is part of what makes Lamando.com so memorable. It represents an era when the internet still had mystery, when it still felt like an uncharted territory filled with digital urban legends. There's something uniquely unsettling about a game that just exists without any context. It feels like something that was never meant to be found in the first place. It's just a random website existing out there. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Even though Lamando.com never presents itself as a game with a clear story, there is a deeper narrative hidden beneath its surface. Unlike traditional horror games that lay out their plot through cutscenes or text logs, Lamando's lore has to be pieced together from cryptic clues scattered throughout the site. The core story revolves around a man named Yukito who once had a dream to create Fancy Island, an indoor theme park. He spent years designing it, pouring everything into what he believed would be a magical, whimsical place, but the moment it opened, something went horribly wrong. On the park's very first day, an unknown and highly contagious virus spread among the employees, leading to 17 people being rushed to the hospital. This disaster, known as the Incident now, forced Fancy Island to close immediately, shutting its doors forever after just a single day of operation. Yukihito, feeling personally responsible for this catastrophe, disappeared from the public eye, retreating into isolation. As the days passed, he became consumed by guilt, filling a journal with his nightmares and suicidal thoughts. Eventually, he decided to take his own life, leaving his dream, now a broken, abandoned shell, behind. But the story doesn't end there. Fancy Island, now empty, became something else. The park, once meant to bring joy, turned into a breeding ground for horror. It's now haunted by ghosts, malevolent entities tied to this tragedy. Among them is Yukihito himself, trapped in the very place he created. The game never explicitly states who these spirits are, but it's heavily implied that they are the 17 employees who contracted that virus on the opening day. The backstory recontextualizes the entire experience of Lamando.com. The distorted clown-like figure in the final confrontation, the eerie abandoned setting, the way the entire game feels like a maze that leads nowhere. It all ties back to this idea of a failed dream turned nightmare. What was once meant to be a joyful, colorful escape became a prison of fear and suffering. What makes this lore so interesting is that it wasn't forced onto the player. It wasn't something obvious spelled out in giant blocks of text. Instead, it was buried within the game's hidden pages, left for players to discover on their own. Some people may have played Lamando.com without ever realizing it had a story at all. That ambiguity, the fact that the game never fully explains itself, is what makes it so effective. But for those who did piece it together, it only made the experience more unsettling. Because if Fancy Island was meant to be a real place in the game's universe, then what exactly was Lamando.com? Was it supposed to be a recreation of the abandoned park? A digital afterlife for the souls trapped there? Or was it something worse, a living, haunted entity that spreads through the internet itself? The site never gives a clear answer, which only adds to its legacy. Some mysteries are scarier when they remain unsolved. Even years later, the hidden lore of Lamando.com still sparks discussion among those who remember it. For many, it wasn't just a horror game, it was a puzzle, something that felt bigger than just a creepy website. And because so little is known about its creator, or its origins, the lore almost feels like the only explanation that we have. One of the most interesting things about Lamando.com is that the experience isn't the same for everyone. Depending on how you access the site, you might encounter entirely different scares, puzzles, and mechanics. Unlike a traditional horror game that functions the same way across all devices, Lamando adapts. For those who visited it on a laptop or a desktop, the site functioned as this sprawling, nightmarish maze. This was the most complete version of the game, the one that most people remember from the early days of internet horror. It had the infamous fourth wall breaking tricks, the unpredictable pop-up ads, and the eerie sense that something was always waiting. But if you visited on a smartphone, the experience was entirely different. The mobile version of Lamando was a stripped-down, faster-paced horror experience. It still had the terrifying imagery and jump scares, but the puzzle-solving elements were simplified. The mansion's webpage and navigation was more linear, making it feel less like a maze and more like a haunted house attraction that you were being pushed through. Some sections only exist on the desktop version, and some only existed on the mobile version. Even stranger than this, though, is the fact that Lamando.com has a sequel, or at least something close to it. At some point, another version of the site emerged, known as Deep Fancy Island. Some players consider it a full sequel, while others call it just an expansion of the original game. Like the first Lamando, it features a maze-like structure, terrifying visuals, and a surreal sense of unease. But instead of simply rehashing the original experience, Deep Fancy Island introduces new puzzles, new areas, and new horrors. Despite this though, the consensus is that the original Lamando is the scarier of the two. It feels more raw and unfiltered and unpredictable, and the sequel feels more structured, but less disturbing. The internet has changed. Today, most online spaces feel controlled, curated, and unpredictable. Every platform is designed to keep you uncomfortable, with algorithms feeding you content that aligns with your interest. But for those who grew up in the early 2000s and 2010s, the internet was something entirely different. It was unpredictable, chaotic, and sometimes genuinely unsettling. That's why Lamando.com holds such a unique place in GenZ's collective memory. It wasn't just another horror game, it was something you had to experience firsthand. Something that made you feel vulnerable, curious, and completely out of control. Unlike modern horror games that are polished and structured, Lamando felt dangerous. It wasn't just a game, it was a trap. For many Gen Z internet users, their first exposure to Lamando wasn't from playing it themselves, but from YouTube playthroughs and horror compilations. Channels dedicated to online mysteries would feature the game, showing off its disturbing imagery, bizarre mechanics, and infamous jump scares. Even those who never dared to visit the site firsthand still felt its presence. It became part of the broader internet horror culture, mentioned in the same breath as SCPs, ARGs, and creepypastas. And if you're the kind of person who grew up exploring the weirder side of the internet, you definitely heard about it. As the years passed, Lamando.com took on a nostalgic quality. It became one of those strange artifacts of the early web, something that felt like it belonged to a different era. For Gen Z, Lamando.com is more than just a creepy website. It's a reminder of a time when the internet felt limitless. It represents the thrill of clicking on something you weren't supposed to, of stumbling into a digital space that felt like it existed out of time. It's one of those rare internet experiences that couldn't be recreated today. Even now, the site remains online, and as long as it does, it will continue to be rediscovered by new generations, ready to experience its horrors for the first time. Because some things never really die. They just wait for you to come back. If you were online in the early 2000s, there was a trap waiting for you. A seemingly harmless flash animation with a simple message. A blank screen, a goofy face bouncing around, a grating, looping song. Annoying, sure, but harmless, at least that's what you thought, until you tried to leave. The moment you clicked the X, things spiraled out of control. Instead of closing, 6 new browser windows popped up, all playing the same animation, all blaring the same song. You tried again. 6 became 36, then hundreds. The pop-ups multiplied exponentially, swarming your screen. They weren't just sitting still either, they bounced around, dodging your cursor, making it nearly impossible to close them. The speakers blasted the taunting laughter at full volume, and your system, whatever it was, started to choke. At first, you fought back. You tried Alt F4, but the pop-ups just respawned faster. You tried Control Alt Delete, but by the time the task manager loaded, your mouse was lagging and your PC was wheezing under the strain. Now you're desperate. You're pressing keys at random, your mouse is barely moving, your open documents, your unsaved work, and that history paper due tomorrow is all still up in a different window, and you can't reach it. And now there's only one way out. You held down the power button until the screen went black. And then when you rebooted, all that unsaved work was gone, and if the abrupt shutdown corrupted files, they weren't coming back. Some users found their system still infected, the pop-ups launching immediately on startup. A worst-case scenario that meant a full system wipe might be the only fix. People panicked. Text forums filled with horror stories. Chain emails warned users never to visit youdon'tknowwhoiam.org, which only made people even more curious. The internet was still new to most, and suddenly it felt dangerous. Was this some hacker messing with people, a joke taken too far, or something worse? But one thing was clear. If you weren't careful online, you'd pay for it. And this was just the beginning. Nobody knows exactly who made it. Nobody knows exactly why, but by 2002, You Are an Idiot had already started making its way around the internet, turning curiosity into regret. The first known appearance of the Trojan, officially called Ulfiz, was buried somewhere in the sketchier corners of the web. The most plausible theory is that it was an adult website. It makes sense. High traffic, high temptation, and a perfect place to prey on users who weren't thinking clearly. Someone desperate enough to click a sketchy link wouldn't stop to question it, and once the pop-up started, it was too late. But that wasn't what made it famous. That came later, when the site youdon'tknowwhoiam.org went live. This was the first confirmed home of the virus, and it spread fast. Word got out through internet forums. Back then, forums were the lifeblood of online discussion, places where people shared everything from tech advice to urban legends. Users warned each other, whatever you do, don't go to this site. Of course, nothing fuels curiosity more than being told not to do something. The warning itself became bait, daring people to test it for themselves. Some did it for the thrill. Others did it to prank their friends, sending the link disguised as something innocent. Soon, chain emails started circulating, which only made more people click. The virus became a challenge, a rite of passage for anyone who thought they knew their way around the internet. And then came the rumors. People swore that it wiped their entire hard drive, destroyed files beyond recovery, or even permanently broke computers. None of this was technically true, at least not in its original form. The official version of Ulfiz was annoying and disruptive, but it didn't reach into your files or erase your system. The real damage came from forced shutdowns and corrupted data, not from the Trojan itself. But once something gets famous like this, it mutates. Hackers started modifying it, adding actual malware into new variants. Some did cause serious damage, running on startup or embedding deeper into the system. By the time 2003 rolled around, nobody knew which version they were getting. Clicking that link became a gamble. Then, in 2004, something unexpected happened. Instead of dying out, You Are an Idiot got preserved. A new website, youareanidiot.org, launched. This time, a safe mirror version. Created by a user named Andrew Ragnar, it kept the infamous animation alive but stripped out the worst parts. No pop-up chaos, no system overload, just a nostalgic look at one of the internet's weirdest traps. By 2006, YouTube was taking off, and "You Are an Idiot" became a meme. People who never fell for the original virus still knew about it thanks to remixes, reaction videos, and joke compilations. It had gone from a digital nightmare to an internet in-joke. But at its core, the Trojan was more than just an obnoxious prank. It was a lesson in internet evolution. The web was growing fast, too fast for most users to keep up. As technology advanced, so did the threats. The more sophisticated the internet became, the smarter that bad actors got. And for many people, "You Are an Idiot" was their first wake-up call. "You Are an Idiot" wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It didn't spread through emails or worm its way into other systems. It was a Trojan horse, a piece of software that looked harmless but wreaked havoc once activated. And it didn't even have to install anything. Everything happened in real time, right in your browser. The attack had two main weapons: JavaScript and Flash. JavaScript was already becoming a powerful web tool in the early 2000s. It allowed websites to be more interactive, making buttons, forums, and animations work without needing a full page reload. But that same interactivity also made it a perfect tool for chaos. JavaScript could open new windows, resize them, prevent users from closing them, and even override keyboard shortcuts. Combine that with a looping Flash animation and you had the ultimate digital trap. The moment a user landed on youdon'tknowwhoiam.org, the attack began. The Flash animation loaded first, playing the now infamous "You Are an Idiot" clip on a loop. The user could try to leave, but that's when the JavaScript kicked in. Clicking the X made 6 more windows open, and trying to refresh did the same thing. These weren't normal browser windows either. They were scripted to move around, dodging the mouse, making them frustratingly difficult to close. If a user managed to click one though, more appeared instantly. The longer they fought it, the worse it got. And because JavaScript had control over system resources, the pop-ups stacked exponentially. As each window loaded the Flash animation, RAM usage skyrocketed. On older machines, it didn't take long for the system to lag, freeze, or crash completely. If a user tried to kill the browser with Ctrl-Alt-Delete, sometimes that just triggered more pop-ups. On Windows 2000 and 9X, like Windows 98 and ME, the damage was even worse. Those systems had weaker memory management, meaning once resources were maxed out, they became completely unresponsive. Users couldn't even open Task Manager before their PC locked up. Windows XP, on the other hand, was a game changer. It had better ways to handle rogue applications. If you knew what you were doing, you could right-click the browser in the taskbar, select Close Group, and shut all pop-ups at once. If that failed, Task Manager could usually terminate the process before things got out of hand. This small difference meant that XP users were far less likely to suffer major damage, but most people didn't know that. For something that started as an annoying internet trap, "You Are an Idiot" didn't just disappear, it evolved. What should have been a forgettable piece of malware turned into an internet legend, a meme, and a weird badge of honor for an entire generation. At first, it was a cautionary tale. If you were online in the early 2000s, you either fell for it or knew someone who did. It became an initiation of sorts. If you hadn't been caught by the pop-ups yourself, you probably saw someone else panic as their screen filled with laughing faces. It was a shared internet experience, something that united tech forums, school computer labs, and online chat rooms. But as time passed, something changed. The fear turned into nostalgia. People started using the clip as a joke, trolling friends, inserting it into fake hacking pranks, or just referencing it in online culture. The laughing face became a meme before memes were even called memes. And this is where Gen Z comes in. For millennials, "You Are an Idiot" was something you actually had to worry about. If you clicked the wrong link, your computer could really crash. But for Gen Z, it became a part of early internet nostalgia. Even those who never personally experienced this virus still recognize the music, the face, and the joke. It became part of the aesthetic of old school YouTube, Flash games, and the chaotic internet humor that defined the late 2000s. As the 2010s rolled around, "You Are an Idiot" became a deep-cut reference in Gen Z meme culture. It was part of the cursed internet aesthetic, alongside things like old Windows era messages, pixelated graphics, and screamer videos. If you spent time on forums like Reddit or 4chan, or watched nostalgic YouTube channels, you probably saw people bringing it up as a piece of lost internet history. And then came the resurrections. With the rise of internet nostalgia, fan-made recreations of You Are an Idiot started appearing. Some were harmless remakes of the original pop-up attack, while others took it further, turning it into actual malware again. The legend had come full circle. What was once a harmless prank had become a digital ghost that refused to die. Today, You Are an Idiot is more than just an old-school virus. It represents a time before social media monopolies, before algorithm-driven content, before everything was sanitized and polished. Back then, the internet was unpredictable, weird, and sometimes outright hostile. And for many people, that's exactly why it was fun. Kraina Gerzhibov TV definitely holds a nostalgic place for many in Gen Z, especially those who were deep into internet horror during the early to mid 2010s. It was part of a wave of eerie, cryptic web series that thrived on the internet's obsession with unsettling lost media and analog horror. The VHS-style visuals, the distorted 1980s educational TV aesthetic, and the eerie, nonsensical storytelling made it feel like something pulled from a forgotten past, even for people who had never encountered anything like it before. That sense of mystery and unease was exactly what made it so captivating. Kraina Gerzhibov TV follows Agatha, a young girl who appears to be the host of an old-school educational TV show called Smile Guide. However, as the series progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that something is wrong. The show, which starts off as an innocent instructional program, begins to break down into eerie, distorted, and often disturbing imagery, hinting at a much darker reality lurking beneath the surface. The story seemingly begins with Agatha living under the control of her overbearing mother. From fragmented interviews interspersed throughout the series, we learn that her mother claims Agatha was a shy, lonely child, or a wallflower. Her mother's presence is always foreboding, and in one of the final moments of the series, it suggested that she physically harmed Agatha, possibly even removing her eyes. Agatha starts off as the innocent host of Smile Guide, teaching the audience how to perform basic tasks in an exaggerated, almost robotic manner. The first episode, How to Apple, gives an early sign that things are not what they seem. While Agatha appears to be teaching something as harmless as coring an apple, sudden disturbing interruptions occur, including what looks like an atomic bomb schematic disguised as an apple diagram. A shadowy woman, presumed to be her mother, also appears in strange, out-of-context interview clips. This sets the tone for the series, an illusion of normalcy breaking apart. Each subsequent episode of Smile Guide becomes more erratic, introducing surreal elements, bizarre characters like Maggie the squirrel and the Jeansmen, and recurring motifs like mushrooms, cows, and uteruses. And actually, Kraina Gerzhibov TV translates to Land of Mushrooms TV. These elements seem symbolic of Agatha's psychological and physical torment, though exactly what they represent is still up for debate. By Smile Guide number 4, How to Your Hair, Agatha is visibly losing herself. Her mother states that she no longer recognizes her, reinforcing the idea that Agatha is experiencing some kind of dissociation or transformation. During this episode, Agatha cuts off her hair while receiving mysterious fan mail. She is tormented by two new characters, Carolina and the Jeansman, who make her act erratically. Her breakdown accelerates with seizures, manic laughter, and disturbing distortions in the footage. The Jeansman in particular seems to have a menacing role in her life, possibly representing a real-world abuser. In Smile Guide 5, Agatha begins splitting into different versions of herself. A bald version of her appears at the start, as if she's shedding her former identity. She hosts a surreal game show called Telegame, but her behavior is erratic, and disturbing messages appear on screen, like, "What do wind makes telephone?" As the episode progresses, a doctor informs her that, quote, "the mushrooms are receding," and she responds with, quote, "I want to die." This moment hints that she has been under the influence of mind-altering substances, or has been subjected to some kind of external control. As the breakdown worsens, horrifying flashes of fingers being cut off, cows and aggressive SH escalate the tension. The show's intended structure has almost completely collapsed at this point, mirroring Agatha's mental state. She's no longer just hosting Smile Guide, she is trapped in it. The final episode, How Your Child, serves as the series' eerie conclusion. Agatha is now interacting with a doll that represents a child, possibly symbolizing her younger self or the idea of motherhood. In a disturbing turn, she violently shakes Maggie the squirrel to death. This act might signify her breaking free from whatever influence or control the characters in her world, or her mind, had over her. At the very end, she finds herself in a dark void where a grotesquely realistic version of Maggie tells her to open her eyes to the mushroom light. This moment is crucial. When she finally removes her signature paper eyes, her real eyes are revealed to be completely white. She panics, screams, and then the screen cuts to an open field. The first real, untouched footage in the entire series. This final sequence suggests multiple possible interpretations. Some believe that Agatha has finally escaped her psychological prison and is seeing the real world for the first time, albeit in a deeply traumatized state. Others believe that this signifies complete submission, her mind breaking under the weight of whatever has been happening to her. One of the most chilling final revelations comes when she references her mother, implying that her mother spooned out her eyes. Whether this is literal or metaphorical remains ambiguous, but it reinforces the idea that Agatha's mother played a significant role in her suffering. What does this all mean, though? The exact meaning of Krena Gerzhabov TV remains elusive, which is why so many theories have been proposed. Some of the most prominent interpretations suggest that the series could be a metaphor for drug addiction or mind control, as seen in the constant references to mushrooms and altered states, or a metaphor for child abuse and trauma, hinted at through Agatha's fragmented memories, her mother's ominous presence, and her deteriorating state. Or it could be a metaphor for Cold War nuclear paranoia, which is a real theory people have. This is reinforced by the atomic bomb schematic, the references to Garwolin, a Polish city bombed in World War II, and the Jeans Man symbolizing Western freedom. A huge reason why Krena Gerzhabov TV resonates with Gen Z is that it came up during the peak of YouTube horror culture. The early 2010s were filled with creepypastas, analysis videos, and ARGs that made every weird or unexplained piece of media feel like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Channels like Nexpo and Nightmind helped introduce and analyze the series for non-Polish speaking audiences, which might be where you have nostalgia from. Theories about this show, like the Cold War one or the drug one, only made it more fascinating, and the sense of trying to decode a hidden narrative became a huge part of why people remember this series so fondly. Another reason why Krena Gerzhabov TV feels nostalgic for Gen Z is because it shares DNA with other internet horror classics, like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, Petscop, and Marble Hornets. That era of YouTube was all about strange, unsettling content that blurred the lines between fiction and reality, leaving just enough unexplained for people to stay hooked. If you were online between 2012 and 2016, there was a good chance that you came across at least a mention of it, even if you never watched the episodes yourself. And the fact that it was in Polish only added to the mystique. It felt like some obscure, foreign relic that made it even creepier and more fascinating.